Hi, AP Psych students. Today we're going to look at drugs and consciousness. Of course, taking drugs puts you in an altered state of consciousness. And so today we're going to talk about the psychoactive drugs that affect your mood and your consciousness. So a psychoactive drug is any kind of chemical substance that alters your perceptions, alters your mood, and affects your consciousness. Okay, so it puts you in a different state of consciousness. In this particular lesson, we talk about Jane Doe. I'm not going to spend as much time on this video because I only have 15 minutes. But if you look at it, we're going to learn about the effects of drugs, physiological and psychological. And so you kind of think about this lady. She's a 27-year-old woman who uses heroin on a daily basis, and she says she needs more of the drug to feel normal. She was abused as a child and has difficulty coping with the abuse, and she has difficulty keeping a job because of her excessive absenteeism due to illness, but is it really illness? Her addiction has also impacted her relationship with family and friends. So as we look at tolerance and withdrawal and those kind of things, you want to think about this kind of scenario. All right, so substance use is when you're a user, but it doesn't necessarily interfere with your life. So you're using some kind of substance, alcohol, caffeine, or some kind of illegal drugs. Those are all substance users. Smokers are substance users. Substance abuse is when you're using to the extent that your ability to fulfill your daily responsibilities is somewhat impaired. It could result in you ending up in some kind of dangerous situation, and it could put you in legal jeopardy. So, if you're, having to go to court because you've been drinking and driving, or you got caught buying some kind of illegal substance, all those kind of things. That's going to put you in the substance abuse category. There is a category, if you've done your reading, in the DSM-5, which is our diagnosis manual for psychology. We'll talk about it a lot through the years for substance abuse. And so that's why we look at these things from the psychological perspective. All right, you got to understand what tolerance is, and that is you get to a certain level of use of psychoactive drugs where you don't get the same effect anymore, and so you need to take more of the psychoactive drug in order to get the same kind of effect. I typically talk about caffeine. I am a substance user because I have to have caffeine every day, and I have withdrawal symptoms. Fortunately for me, it doesn't take more caffeine to get that original effect. I'm good with my cup of my iced latte in the morning. So, but if you were taking some kind of drug like opiates, you develop tolerance very quickly, and you have to have more of it. Heroin's the worst. People are always chasing their original high with heroin. That you quickly develop tolerance. It only takes a use or two. All right, dependence is when you got to use it. You feel like you can't get the same. You can't feel the same without it. So you're compulsively using the substance. Now you can have a psychological dependence where mentally you feel you need it. You got to have it to perform, to feel the way you want to feel. That's a psychological dependence. But you can also develop a physical dependence. That's where if you have a physical dependence and you stop taking the drug, you experience withdrawal symptoms. All right. So what's withdrawal? That is when you start having physical discomfort when you stop using because you're dependent on it and your body is used to having it and you need it. So for me, as on my caffeine addiction, my caffeine dependence, if I don't drink my coffee or have some kind of form of caffeine during the day, I'm going to experience headaches. All right, that's not, that's pretty minor, but depending on the drug, you could have seizures. Alcohol dependence, people that are dependent on alcohol get the shakes, and there's all kinds of terrible withdrawal symptoms depending on the amount you use of the drug, the length of time you've taken the drug, and what drug it is. Some cause dependence much more quickly, and so withdrawal is usually more severe in those cases. All right, so tolerance. If we looked at Jane, that first one, she's using heroin, but she can't use enough heroin. Heroin is a very common opiate that people overdose on because they need to take more to get to that same high. And so Jane has reached a tolerance. She needs more of the drug to get her same high. and to feel the way she did. With heroin, they never feel the way they did and they just keep taking. And that's why you see so many overdose cases with heroin in particular. Now, dependency. If you look at the DSM-5, which is how we diagnose mental illness, and substance abuse is in mental illness category, if you meet 4 of the following symptoms, 4 out of 7, then you're considered to have a dependence. So this could be nicotine if you're a smoker or vapor. This could be caffeine, or this could be cocaine, or depends on your drug. So if you develop a tolerance, you experience withdrawal symptoms. If you're using the substance for a longer period or greater quantities than intended, that usually sounds like a prescription medication. If you have a desire to quit or cut back on it, so you're trying to quit, that is actually a symptom of dependence. Usually you're not successful. If you spend a lot of time using, or trying to obtain it, to score the drug, then that is a symptom of dependence. If you stop doing your normal activities, because you're spending time using is usually it. So if you reduce or quit your usual activities in pursuit of the drug, that is a sign of dependence. And then if you keep using the drug, even though you know how harmful it is for you, I think of smokers usually with this one. I mean, I have had a lot of smokers in my life. They just keep smoking. They know it's terrible for them. My husband went through this. He, definitely he was smoking at least a pack a day. He, wanted to quit. He tried to quit several times. He knew it was really bad for him. You have to stop what you're doing and go have a cigarette. So all those fall into the dependency, but we don't think of, nicotine as a drug like it is, And some of you know people who do the same thing with a vape. It's really not any different. You're still chasing that nicotine experience. So those are, if you meet 4 of these, then you have a dependency, All right. Psychological addiction is a psychological need to use the drug. So you think you feel better with it, you perform better with it, it relieves your stress, you've got to have it. And a lot of times we are using psychoactive drugs to relieve stress, or because we don't want to deal with negative emotions. And so that's the psychological component. A physiological or physical addiction is when we have a need for the drug to alleviate some kind of physical pain. That's the more difficult addiction to overcome, because you have those withdrawal symptoms. Typically with psychological addiction, you're not going to have the withdrawal symptoms, right? Because if it's not a physical one, psychoactive drugs can cause a physiological addiction, a psychological addiction, or both. The hardest drugs to kick are the ones that really cause a dependence in both psychological and physiological or physical dependence. I'm not going to talk about Jane. All right, then we have addiction. All right, addiction is compulsive drug use despite any kind of harmful consequences. That's when you can't stop using, and as a result of your use, you're not meeting your work, your social, or family obligations. So in the case of Jane, she's not getting to work. She's claiming illness, right? She's not meeting her work obligations. She spends a lot of time trying to get the drug. And then sometimes addiction also will show, depending on what the drug is, that you've developed tolerance and withdrawal. So those are all indicators that you have an addiction. So you got to keep that in mind. All right. Why do some of us get addicted to things and others do not? There are some biological factors. Some of us may be more genetically predisposed to addiction. It tends to run in families. My own children, I have warned them on my husband's side. Well, for my daughter, on my husband's side, he has a history of alcoholics. Alcoholism is a problem. His dad was an alcoholic. Grandfather was an alcoholic. It runs on that side of the family. And so he is not a drinker. He rarely drinks at all. And I think because he's seen that, but I've always warned, the kids that you're predisposed to that. On my side of the family, I have an uncle I have actually a couple uncles on each side of my mom and dad's brothers who have addiction issues or had. And so I've always warned my kids, you have to be careful with alcohol because it's coming at you from both sides. And so you really have to watch it. Also, our body craves dopamine. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter. It's kind of a feel-good neurotransmitter, dopamine and serotonin. All right. And so we have this reward circuit. And so when we want to reward, it releases, when we feel rewarded, we release dopamine. And so sometimes a person's dopamine reward circuit is different, and that will make them more predisposed to addiction. All right. There can also be psychological, social, and cultural factors. It may be like alcohol. In some cultures, it's really common. Everybody drinks. And so when you go to parties, or, just at the house, I know that, in different families, alcohol is just part of the culture. And so it may set you up for, drinking a lot. And then if you have a genetic predisposition to being an alcoholic, then that's a problem. It can also be your expectations in social settings, okay? And your belief. Maybe you believe that, alcohol is no big deal. And so all those things can play a factor into, why you might become addicted to, say, alcohol. And maybe your family are users of other kinds of drugs. And so that's what you're growing up in. And you see, that's just common. That's what you've learned. That's what people do. And so, of course, that's going to make somebody that's growing up in that environment potentially more predisposed to being a substance abuser, to being an addict, because, they usually start earlier and that's what they know. Doesn't mean you have to become that. I can tell you that my husband, he watched his dad be an alcoholic and his grandfather be an alcoholic, and he and his brother just have no interest in that. So, so you can overcome that. It's certainly my husband and his brother have no interest in that. Now, their sister, on the other hand, she can put back a few drinks. And so, we usually have concerns about her. She seems to be able to control it though. Okay. But, it's just something you have to be cautious of. All right. What makes Jane a heroin addict as opposed to a substance user that has a dependence? She has a dependence for sure, but she's spending so much time trying to score the drug and trying to, she's going to lose her job probably because she doesn't show up. And so when it really begins affecting your life, then that makes you an addict. Okay, you're risking going to jail. It's an illegal substance. And so that's what qualifies her as an addict. Okay, now it says click here to apply your knowledge. If you go to your daily agenda, this same thing is here, so you don't have to go into you don't have to go into this PowerPoint to click it. So you're going to go ahead and this is looking at tolerance, withdrawal, dependence, and those kind of things. So go ahead and do that assignment. And then tomorrow we'll start looking at categories of drugs. Now, if I get a little farther in the lecture, you may have to pick up the categories of drugs. I'll pre-tape tomorrow. You may have to pick that up, but so you're just going to have to, check in with me and make sure, see how far I got. You can see tomorrow. It'll pick right up. And so if you're doing digital lessons, you'll be able to get it all. Okay, so have a great day.